Approval of the agenda. Everyone's had a look at it. Any additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, and it is, I'm sorry, who that's moved it? I'm bad with names, but
It's Phyllis.
Phyllis, okay, and there was a gentleman above you, Phyllis, who seconded it?
David.
Okay, thank you for the help, and I apologize. Okay, they'll call the question. And those in favor? Okay, opposed? Okay, the agenda's been approved. The meeting, July 28th has been circulated, or the minutes of the meeting have been circulated. And are there any errors or omissions? Okay, hearing none, then I'll call for a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from July 28th. Would somebody move then adoption? Okay, it's Phyllis again. Is there a seconder for that? Eleanor, can I get you to do that? Because I know your name. Okay. Then we'll call a question. And those in favor of adopting the July 28th minutes, please raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, the motion's carried. With that, then we'll move on to Sherry and Alan, and we'll turn the meeting over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Sherry, shall I go ahead, Sherry? Okay, great. Thanks very much, Mr. Vice Chair, and hi, everybody. Great to see everyone again. I hope I'm up in Kelowna. I know Sherry's in Victoria, but the smoke's a little bad here. I don't know what it's like in Okanagan Falls right now. Hopefully you're going to get some blue skies soon. Anyway, let's move on. I've got the share screen ready to go here. I'm going to bring up some slides, which I'd like to walk through with the group if I could. Let me just do that here. Okay. Oops. I'm going to just, oh, no, there we go. Can everybody see that? Can anybody see that? Yes? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Great. Okay. Let me, if I could, I'm just going to go back a little bit. There we go. Okay, beautiful picture. Clear skies there. Perfect. Okay, here we go. We had a discussion recently. Sherry and I reached out to the chair and vice chair because we wanted just to touch base before this meeting and to talk about the process a little bit. And as we were speaking in our meeting, and Christy was in the meeting too, I should mention, as we were all kind of conferring in the meeting, we decided that it may be a good idea to begin today and maybe focus even today on a little bit of an overview of the broader study and kind of a process overview that consists of two parts. One is the broader context for the study on which we're working right now. And the second then is kind of within our study, what are the key stages that we should be expecting as a committee going forward? So this presentation, these slides that we're going to put on screen here, will, we hope, kind of give you a sense of where we are in the overall picture as we embark upon this study, and then also give you some indication of the key dates that we're going to be looking at going forward and the key stages in our work program that we touched on last time we met with you. But really just kind of focus a little bit more specifically on some of those transition points and some of those key points and key check-in points with the committee and with the community. So let's begin if we could, and it might be most effective if we start, if we go through the slides and then pause for questions afterwards, if that's okay. Now, let's kind of go back half a step to what we discussed at our last meeting, where we talked about the governance and services and the restructure system in British Columbia. And when we think about the local government system as a whole, and local government in BC, as the committee may know, probably knows, consists of two key parts. There's actually a few more than that, but we're going to focus on two key parts. One is regional districts, and the other is municipalities. Municipalities are actually part of regional districts as well, but they're also separate legal entities. And so they kind of are separate then, but they're part of the local government system of BC. Constitutionally, it is the provincial government and every provincial government that is responsible for, excuse me, the local government system in the particular province that we're talking about, in our case, British Columbia, of course. So it's a responsibility that the ministry, that is exercised through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. It's something that the ministry takes a lot of care with because it's such an important structure. And we talked last time about how when we're looking to change our position within that broader system of local governments in British Columbia, that is when we're looking at perhaps moving from an unincorporated ultimately to some kind of incorporated body, we look to the ministry to for some guidance on that. And the ministry, though, will kind of say, well, we've got a process on how to do that, a restructure process, but we look to the community to initiate that restructure process. Last time, you'll recall, we talked about the process being and the initiative being kind of bottom up and driven by the community, but overseen by the ministry and kind of occurring within and following a well-developed process that is quite prescribed, actually, because it's been in place for some time and it's evolved over the years, but it's quite nicely honed now, and it consists of a number of different parts. And we're going to talk about those parts and kind of where we are fitting within that overall system right now, within that overall process of looking at local government restructure. Now, let's look, because it's always good to pick a specific example. Let's take the example of the study that's going on right now just north of us in the Columbia Shuswap. So we'll look at the Columbia Shuswap simply by way of an example, but we are kind of not dissimilar, and we'll see that as we go through, but we do have a couple of key differences that are going to be important for us to understand because they do affect kind of the flow of our process. Now, the process through which the creation of a new municipality is examined in 3 different phases, and we have followed those phases in the Columbia Shuswap. And I don't want to kind of prejudge the outcome of anything we do. I don't want to presume that we will be going towards some kind of ultimate incorporation, because that's going to be ultimately up to the citizens in Okanagan Falls. But it's also going to be something that the committee has to think about carefully over the next several months in terms of recommending to the next phase. But let's just kind of, for the purposes of illustration this evening, talk about a process that may end up in incorporation and that is broken into 3 different phases. The first phase, and we saw this in the Columbia Shuswap, is the governance study. So the governance study has a number of different purposes. There are 3 kind of key purposes. One is to document and assess the current state of local governance and service delivery in the electoral area. In Columbia Shuswap, it was Electoral Area C, the Blind Bay Sorrento. With us, of course, it's Area D with the Okanagan Falls. The second is to understand then the concerns and the interests that residents have as they relate to governance and service delivery. So what do we have in place? And then what are some concerns? What are some issues that folks have with what we have in place? And then the third is to say, okay, what are some future governance and service delivery options for the community to address those concerns that we talk about? The key option, of course, is incorporation, but there are some other ways we could do that as well. And we'll see that as in the case of Columbia Shuswap, just the example that we're following. Now, the second phase, I should mention, sorry, in the Columbia Shuswap example, the committee determined after phase 1, that is after the governance and services study, the committee determined based on the study and based on the community input that there was sufficient interest in exploring incorporation as an option. So that was very important, because then it meant we're going to go to the next phase. And the committee also decided, though, that if incorporation were not chosen, the existing electoral area, Area C in the Columbia Shuswap, would be broken into 2 separate electoral areas. So there was no status quo that we're comparing it to. In fact, the status quo itself was changing from 1 electoral area to 2 electoral areas. But that was going to be the default in the event that incorporation were not voted upon. All of that then kind of led to the second phase of the study. And in Columbia Shuswap, the second phase was the boundary analysis. Now, you may already be noticing a little bit of a difference with our situation. We'll come to that in a moment. But the second phase was the boundary analysis. So the boundary analysis had a few purposes. One is to identify and recommend a preferred boundary for the incorporation option and the default option. That is that 2 areas. Then we wanted to based on a technical analysis of lots of different factors, identify and recommend what that boundary should be. Once that boundary was in place, then the overall process was looking to go to the 3rd phase. And the 3rd phase is the incorporation study. The 3rd phase looks at a detailed comparison of the services and governance in place. Our current system, or when we look at the governance study in that 1st phase, it was kind of, what do we have in place right now? Well, we're looking at a detailed comparison now of those services and the governance, and we're seeking to understand what the decision to create a new municipality would mean for the community in terms of the service provision, that is who provides the services, the service decision-making and the broader decision-making or the broader governance for the community, the cost of the services and the related cost to government, and the property taxes. So what property holders in the area would have to pay. So that the comparison then is done in the sense that it looks at all of those implications for the incorporation option and it compares them to the unincorporated option. Now, how does all this fit together? Let's just look at this here. When we look at the Columbia Shuswap example, we started that actually back in 2016, 2017 with phase 1. At the end of phase 1, there was an exit ramp. The committee could have decided, based on the analysis it had done and based on what it had heard from the community, that we're going to stop there. We've got a good sense of what's in place. What we're hearing from the community is that everybody's more or less content with what they're getting. There are no issues we need to address or that restructure is going to be able to address. If we do have issues, we can do it within our current framework of being an electoral area in a regional district. The committee could have decided that. Instead, the committee said, you know what? We've got enough feedback from folks and we've looked at all of this information and we're content to say that there is interest in exploring incorporation further. So they decided to go to phase 2. Phase 2 then in 2018 said, let's pick some boundaries. Let's pick boundaries for the incorporation option and let's pick boundaries for the default option, which in that case was going to be splitting the existing electoral area into 2. Now that was more of a technical exercise in that case. And so there wasn't really an exit ramp at that point. And so the committee took those and created, and when I say the committee, in fact, there was a different committee for the first and a different committee for this new one, but some of the same people. But the CSRD and the ministry decided we'll now go from the boundaries to this 3rd phase where we're in right now. 2019 to 2021, keep in mind, please, that there was a big break there with COVID. So there was an 8-month break. So that's an extended period that we wouldn't normally see. Now we're in phase 3 here, and after phase 3, we may find the committee may find, well, you know what, based on what we've looked at and based on what we're hearing from folks through our engagement, we're not getting a sense that there's an appetite to actually go to referendum. So we're not going to recommend a referendum. I suspect what they'll do instead is say, we're going to recommend a referendum because we've been through this whole process, but electors in the area may decide they don't want to incorporate. At that point, we stop. It's the exit ramp there, and we go back to our unincorporated status. Or the electors could decide they want to proceed, and in which case then we move forward to creating a new municipality. Now, how does all of this look when we take that example with that 3 phases of that overall process towards incorporation? And again, not wanting to presume here that we're heading towards that way in Okanagan Falls, but if we look at the broader process, how we all fit into that, if we take that example from CSRD and we put it into our context in Okanagan Falls, what we see is right now we're here in the governance study. So we know our governance study does certain things. We'll talk about that in a moment. The ministry and the RDOS with this committee has put together phase 2 and phase 1. So our study, in fact, is looking at governance or services and looking at the boundary configuration as well. So we're kind of taking care of both phase 1 and phase 2 as part of phase 1. The committee may decide at the end of this study that, you know what, we've gone to the electors or we've gone to the community and the community is just not interested in proceeding further in our view. Or the committee may say that we've looked at all the information and we're just not convinced there's merit in proceeding further and we have an exit ramp. Or the committee may say, we're convinced having gone through or we're satisfied having gone through the study that there's lots of information here that we should dig into a little further. And there's a potential interest in incorporation. And we hear that from the folks in the community. So let's go forward to a possible phase 3 then and looking at incorporation. So that's where this could end up, or we could have that exit ramp after this study. That's going to be one of the key roles for the committee when we get towards the end of the study, is deciding whether we're going to have that red X or that yellow arrow. Okay, now let's look briefly at our current study, because I talked earlier about how we're going to look at that broader context, where we fit in those 3 phases of that overall process, and then we're going to look at our current study and what's important about the current study. And we touched on some of this last day, so a little bit of this is revision, but we'll introduce some new materials as well. The first is we've got 4 different purposes, as you know, about this study. The first is to get a good understanding and to document the current state. So what are the services that we provide to the local community here in Area D in Okanagan Falls? What are the services? Who provides them? How do we make decisions and who makes decisions over them? What do they cost? All those kinds of things. We're going to be outlining at a high level the service finance, so the cost implications, the governance implications of who makes decisions of incorporation. So if the area were to incorporate, how would service provision, service delivery, funding for services, and decision-making change? We'll look at those through this study. We're also going to identify and recommend a proposed incorporation boundary. And that's, again, where this process has been condensed compared to the one in CSRD. So we'll be looking at that proposed incorporation boundary. And most importantly, perhaps throughout the whole process, and particularly at key points, we'll be engaging the community to make sure that everything we've learned as a committee, they learn as well. Some of the key dates here, some of the key steps in our process, in our current study then, are listed on the screen, are presented on the screen right now. And then we can see our stages on the left-hand side here. And we notice then along the top, our different seasons. We've put them kind of in seasons, and then the individual squares correspond to months. But we're now in summer 2021, and last day we had our kind of project kickoff or project initiation, and we talked about our engagement strategy, and we had some good discussion around that. Now, after this meeting, we're going to be jumping into the fact sheets and the incorporation insight papers. So we're going to be, Sherry and I will be kind of getting into the details about the services and about the different implications that we need to bring back to the committee, and the committee needs to share with the community. All of that stuff will be presented over a period of about 5 months at individual monthly meetings, and we'll give it to you, each service and all of the different implications, in nice chunks, so that we can have some good discussion and leave with a very good understanding and be able to communicate that to the community. I would as well that at every meeting we'll have an opportunity after the meeting to go to the community to ensure that people are kind of kept up to speed and apprised of progress and communicated with throughout. So it's not going to be it's not going to be crickets, silence as crickets for 5 months, and then all of a sudden we talk to people. We're going to be talking to folks as we go along. Oh, I beg your pardon. The fourth step then is our overview mail out, and that's going to come at the end of our analysis of the fact sheets and the incorporation insights paper, because the overview is going to bring all the material together and present that and get it literally on people's doorsteps. We'll then have, following our overview mail out, we'll have our neighborhood meetings, which will be very important because people will have had not only all of the updates, the monthly updates that we produce as we go through the analysis, but they'll also have the overview paper, and that will on their doorsteps, and that will give them a good sense of the bigger picture, and then they can come to the meetings and we can present some materials again and we can have a good discussion. We'll have the panel discussion. that will kind of correspond in terms of timing to the neighborhood meetings, and we'll have some others who have gone through this process, municipal leaders and local government leaders, come and talk to us about their experiences and talk to the community about their experiences. And then we'll get into that other key part of this study, which is to pick a boundary. And there'll be some further engagement with the community on that in a survey as well. Because that's one thing I think I noted last time, that this particular process in which we're engaged really is better than the one that on that particular item that we have been engaged with CSRD, because there it was more treated as a technical analysis, the development of the boundary. And I think we found out that afterwards that it would have probably in hindsight have been better to engage with the community on that, because we've had to go back and revisit some of that stuff. Finally, there'll be the draft and the final report. And as we come forward with that report and present it to the committee and to the community, that's when the committee needs to make that critical decision as to whether it's a red X or a yellow arrow in terms of moving forward. Some key dates here, some key milestones. At the end of our fact sheets and incorporation insight papers, you'll see the yellow dot there just at the beginning of 2022. That's when we'll have all our information to bring together and put into the overview mail out. At the end of our neighborhood meetings, we will have heard quite a bit and presented quite a bit of material to the community, and the committee will have a good sense of comfort levels and issues and interests and where people are sitting in terms of their desire to move on or not move on. And then also then the boundary options in the survey, we'll have some more information back from folks to talk about to understand their concerns and their interests with respect not only to the broader study, but also in particular to the boundary. Okay, let me pause there. I'll get out of the screen share.
Can
Anybody here?
Is anybody saying something?
I've lost sound too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So are
Okay.
there questions for Alan? I'll lead off with one. I noticed in Columbia Shuswap, it looked like you did some of the neighborhood meetings as you were developing the fact sheets. And so I think in that way you moved your engagement process forward sooner and started that process sooner and then spread it out over a longer period of time. And I'm just wondering, did that work? Didn't it work?
So that's a very good question. In fact, we, Mr. Chair, we had, if we even go back to the governance study, 2016, 2017, and we also look ahead to the more recent study, the incorporation study. In fact, in both of those examples, the engagement phase began after the analysis. It turned out, however, that because all of the meetings, or the bulk of the meetings, at least until recently, were in person, all of the committee meetings, we actually had a pretty good turnout. In some cases, 150 people, 200 people coming out to the committee meetings. And so those kind of became not only opportunities for us to brief the committee and to present materials to the committee, but they became kind of de facto community meetings as well, even though they weren't set up as such. But in both cases, we did actually have the formal engagement phase with the process, similar to the neighborhood meetings and all that stuff at the end of the analysis.
Okay, so you just had your committee actually holding its meetings in some of the different areas and
Absolutely.
then allowing those people to come to the meeting. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. We were very careful to make sure that that we kind of moved around the community and had the meetings in various places so that we could kind of take it out to engage as many people in the committee meetings even, and to kind of send the right message in terms of everybody being included. I know those again were the committee meetings though. That's kind of the fundamental point there.
Okay, right. I wouldn't mind if you pop the Gantt chart back up again. think that's
Sure,
useful background.
I can do that. Okay, let me just there we go. Can you see that? Yeah, okay.
So you're seeing boundary option kind of coming into focus early 2022,
Yeah,
March,
so
March,
and
April.
here, this is going to be, if you can see my arrow there, this bit's going to be kind of key, because here's where and if we compare this to Columbia Shuswap, at each one of, oh geez, beg your pardon, at each one of these squares here, that's when we would have a committee meeting, and we had very good attendance at each of those meetings. And then a little further down here, in our case, we're going to have the boundary and stuff. But I would anticipate, if we're able to open and up these meetings and open and meet in person, I would anticipate we're going to get some good turnout in here as well.
Okay, but my question, or what I was trying to clarify, was you would expect to see the boundary options come into focus sort of March, April of next year. Is that
That's correct.
kind of what
That's
you're shooting
correct.
for? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Forgive me, folks. I'm jumping into this at the end after a few minutes late to get logged in. If someone was chairing this before, carry on. If not, I guess I'm just wondering what comments people have with respect to the timelines that are put up there.
Yeah, I was chairing that. I'll defer.
Okay. No, carry on, Bob. You've got it for today.
Oh, thanks. I've got a question for Alan though, and Sherry. I guess that it was kind of a question as to, why the boundary analysis first before there was some, very, clinical looking at financial implications. I'm wondering if, for example, one particular community decided they didn't want to be part of incorporation, is there enough information to know that that might be a disaster in terms of going forward with the rest of the process? Let's use
So,
Heritage Hills as just as an example. If, for example, you found that the community in no way wanted to be a part of an incorporated community or incorporated area, would it be negatively affecting incorporation for the whole rest of the area?
So yeah, can you start, Sherry? So just in terms of kind of the sequence of events and the thinking that kind of behind that sequence, when we start these studies and kind of, so we're at phase one really of that overall process. So the phase one, and as I mentioned, in our situation, we've put together phases 1 and 2. So the service, the governance, and the boundary. But when we look at the governance, that's all about really what do we have in place for Area D right now, for in terms of our services, in terms of our government, our decision making, our costs. So it presumes, when we start this, that nobody has decided, no communities within Area D have decided whether they wish or do not wish to be ultimately become incorporated. It assumes that everybody's starting on the same. It presumes that everybody is starting on the same level of information, and our job as consultants and as the committee, your job as the committee, is to say we are going to increase everybody's level of understanding of what we have in place now, and based on that understanding, individual areas will then determine whether they are interested or not in incorporation. So I'm going to go back to that share screen again, if I could. Bear with me for a second. When we look here, as we go through this process here, that's where we're going to be getting all that information and increasing everybody's base level of information about the services that they have in place, the local government, and all that stuff in Area D. When we get to the neighborhood meetings, the committee will get a sense, and it may even have that sense much before that, but the committee will have that sense through the neighborhood meetings, certainly, as to whether there are specific parts of Area D, specific areas within Area D communities that really do not have concerns with the current level of, with the current method of service delivery, the current structure of local government. And we'll have a sense then going into the discussion on boundary, which areas are most interested in exploring incorporation and which areas really want nothing to do with it. And then we'll get to the point going, say, if we kind of just jump ahead then, and if we presume that it goes to some kind of further phase of a study to look at incorporation, we'll have in that study just the areas within the boundary that have identified or shown an interest in wishing to explore incorporation. And that's when we'll do that very detailed look at kind of what would incorporation mean to people in terms of who provides services, how we make decisions, how we pay for local government and all of the services, and what it means for property taxes. By that point, then, again, our focus will be just on those communities within Area D that wish to explore incorporation. Everybody who has kind of indicated through our consultation, our engagement, that they're not interested, those communities won't be part of that further phase.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, folks?
So
Ron.
I have a question,
Okay. Sorry, I've got Ron and I've got somebody else speaking.
Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yeah.
Okay, Phyllis, ladies first.
Okay, thank you. So I just have a question, just to confirm, like our role, when you say the current study, you've got those 4 steps, and the first 2 is understand and document the current state of services and governance. So that's where, and then the second is to outline the high-level service finance government implications of incorporation. That's where we're working together on that, and you're pulling that together for us. Like because I think like it's a big area, and there's 13 different papers that we read about all the different services that are, so like, in order to get everybody on the same page, how are we going to do that? What you're going to do?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because it's a difficult, you'll realize very quickly as a committee that there's a tremendous amount of information, and because there's so much information, the studies take a while to do. Not only to put the information together, but also for everybody to absorb the information, because there's lots of stuff to learn. Our job as your consultants is to make sure that the material, the information not only is factually correct, but as important as that is to make sure that the material is provided to the committee and the community in a way that is easily understandable, and that it's very simple for the committee to grasp very quickly kind of the bigger picture and kind of what it all means. And but we are there, kind of, if I can put it this way, we're there at every step along the route, because we work for you, and our job is to make sure that you get all the information you need, and you get it in a way that makes sense. And then your job with our assistance is to help the community learn that, but the community will be learning that all along the way. It sounds a little bit daunting, but I assure you, as we go through, you'll see that in fact there's ways to kind of present it or bring it together that it becomes quite intuitive, and it becomes quite interesting and easy to follow.
Yeah, I guess just thinking, reading through all those different fact sheets, is that there's lots of information there, and there's different ways of interpreting some of that information, and maybe there's a way to make it more absorbable, because a lot of people wouldn't wade through all of that information like we as committee members feel we must do. Right?
You're absolutely right, Phyllis, on 2 counts. One is that is something you must do, and because that's your role, is to kind of get into the details. But I think also you're quite right is that very few people will want to go through the 13 different papers. But that's why we have that very important overview document, because that's where we say we're going to pull out the key bits from every piece of from all of these 13 papers, and we're going to bring it together in 4 or 5 pages. And if you as an elector, if you as a voter in Okanagan Falls can kind of focus on the 4 or 5 pages, then that's perfect, because that will give you what you need to know to make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Ron, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Alan. I had a question of clarification, and I apologize for getting confused. We have the phase 1, phase 2 from Sorrento Blind Bay, and then we've got the phase 3. We're doing more of a. I see we've lost Alan. I don't know if he's still there.
Oh, I'm here. Yeah.
I just can't see it.
Okay.
And then we've got the phase 3, and we're kind of, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're kind of doing the phase 1 and phase 2 of the Sorrento Blind Bay. And in this phase 1, we have some benefit from our previous governance review from 2014 to 17, or 15 to 17, where these fact sheets were originated. It was an interesting process because it did result, as I'm sure you're well aware, in the division of Area D into D&I. So we've got a little different process, little different history. But when we get into the detail of the what you referred to as the financial, and you know, for example, the 4 purposes, and I think it was the second purpose outlined at a high level: service, finance, and government. And then in the phase 3, you had the finances, and of course, Bob Bailey's question earlier about finances. I can tell you the number one question I've had in the last few years is always about the cost. So I'm a little confused when I looked at the terms of engagement. I think as they were prepared by staff, there was a limiting in there that we were not supposed to look at finances, which I found puzzling, because you know, interested, curious taxpayers want to know, and to not give that information at the right time, you know, back to Bob Daly's question, it puts you in an awkward position on a boundary decision, because pretty hard to do the one without the other. And so today I'm confused, because it sounds like we're going to do some financial analysis in the phase that we're in now, but it may come after we do the boundary assessment, in which case we're going to tell people who aren't in the boundary that we're not going to do that assessment for them, which almost sounds backwards, because some of those people in some of those communities might want to know that. And if we're not going to give them that opportunity, it sounds not fair, if you care, which some might care. And so my question is, please clarify, because I'm confused. I might be the only one. That's okay.
No, these processes, the province has set up. It's a very deliberate process, in the sense, slow moving, very kind of drawn out, and done those ways on purpose to kind of go through kind of a clear sequence of things. When we look at in the phase in which we are, so this kind of phase 1/phase 2, because you're quite right, we're looking at governance and boundary. So in our current phase, we are going to be focusing on what's currently being delivered in Area D, and that's going to be a little bit different from what you had in your previous study in 2016, because, as you pointed out, we've got a new kind of jurisdiction now. Area D is smaller than it was then, so we're going to kind of update that information. We're going to bring it together. That's going to show kind of all of, like, who provides what currently, what do people pay for it, all of that, how do we make decisions as a regional district, all that kind of stuff. That's all great. We will then, as we talk to folks and we kind of present information, one of the things that's going to be very important to kind of get from people is not only to give them an understanding, but also get from them what concerns do you have with respect to the current services and the current type of governance? Now, I don't want to kind of presume to know the communities intimately in Okanagan Falls at this point, although I suspect by the end of the study, I'll have a much more intimate kind of perspective on things. But that said, when we look at, just again, by way of example, to Columbia Shuswap, there we had Electoral Area C, and we had about 7 different communities, not dissimilar from Area D in RDOS. And we had Sorrento as one, we had Blind Bay as one, but we also had White Lake, we had Eagle Bay, we had Sunnybrae, we had Tappan, we had a number of different communities. We went to each of those communities with the committee and talked in different neighborhood meetings. In some cases, we had a meeting kind of that brought a couple of communities together, but nevertheless, we reached out and we consulted with each of those groups. And what we found was, while there was a very driving interest in some key areas, i.e. Sorrento and Blind Bay, but in White Lake, in Sunnybrae, and Eagle Bay, in those places, people were saying, you know what, we moved out here because we don't want all of the municipal services. We don't want to pay for them. We don't want kind of to have the zoning bylaws in place that we have to follow. We don't want all the regulations that people have in municipalities. We moved here so that we didn't have to live in a municipality. We're quite happy if somebody else wants to look at incorporation. We're not interested. We like what we've got here. Sure, we got quibbles about this and that. We're pretty well off and we're happy here. We heard that from about 5 of the 7 communities in Area C, and that allowed us then to say, okay, great, we're not going to push this rope with these groups. We're going to say, let's focus now our boundary and let's focus our detailed analysis on an incorporation option on a smaller area that consists of the 2 communities that are quite interested in looking further, and this is where maybe it gets to your question a little bit more as well, and are willing to kind of confront some of the implications that we can describe at a high level of incorporation. So for example, we were able to say, when you incorporate, a municipality takes responsibility for the local road network. That's a very expensive service in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases, that's an added cost. The benefit of getting that added cost, that extra responsibility, is that you also get to decide service levels. So it's important for you to look at the types of roads that you have, the amenities that go along with those roads, whether they be bike paths or walking paths or what have you, then that's something that you may want to consider and explore further through incorporation and through the study that looks at that. But if that's something that doesn't really kind of thrill you because there's a cost and you don't see the benefit to kind of offset that cost, that's something to know about too. And maybe that kind of puts you in a different camp going forward. So we may actually be quite surprised that while cost may be a driving factor, there may be other factors as well, but we may be surprised in learning as we get towards the end of this, as the study moves on, we may be surprised in learning just which places in fact do have an interest in going a little further and looking at a more detailed cost comparison of municipal versus regional district. And conversely, which places are really quite satisfied, notwithstanding the odd quibble about services, but really quite satisfied with the status quo. Does that help at all? Or does that confuse it more?
No, it doesn't. I'll be real
Okay.
blunt and real direct. I've talked to people in all the areas. I know them as well as anybody here, maybe better than most. And I'll tell you, Vassal Lake, Upper Carmi, they want to know the cost. They don't want to make the decision on boundary till they know the cost. And if we're going to take cost, real, true data and information away from them, I'm not sure that's the right approach. I understand that's the approach that we're taking. I'm not suggesting that I think it's the best approach. I do know that you have a path, it's tried and true, and you have a reason, it's deliberate. I get all that, I comprehend that. But I know the people I've talked to, and I've heard what they've said, and some of them are pretty bright people, and they really care. And I'm embarrassed, personally, to tell them what you just said. I don't feel comfortable telling them that we're not going to tell them the cost because we're going to make a decision and they might be out of the equation and we're not going to give them that information because we're going to make a decision before they have.
If they're out if they're out of the equation, it'll be by their choice. And they may decide they want the cost, and so they stay in until the very
Well,
end.
they won't know what the
But
costs
also
are.
you-
Yeah, no, you're
but-
making a
but
different point, and that is, how do they get out after the cost if the boundary's been determined? You see how the two are linked.
Yeah, well, you've talked to the people. I'm not sure that everybody on the committee's talked to the people, and the
No, I don't
committee's
think
got to
so.
get out there and talk to people. Yeah,
I agree.
so that's
Yeah.
kind of what matters here.
Oh, I agree, it matters. But you asked me a question, I just answered it.
Yeah.
Okay. Further questions? Or Ron, do you have any supplementals to that?
Not right now, but thank you to the chair. I'm going to ponder it, and maybe we'll
Okay.
talk another day about it. But
Enough.
I do think it's kind of important, and I care about people who are going to be making a real important decision in their communities, and how we're going to answer the question, because I think this question is going to come back more than once.
Okay. To some extent, I think we're playing with the cards we got dealt, but at the moment, and we're just, there may not be a right answer for your question, Ron, given the cards that we've got. That said, rather than pounding away at that nail for a while, I'm going to see if there's any other questions. Mylene. Mylene, do you have a question? Or are you frozen in space?
I have a question about. I have a question. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Great.
I
I
can hear you.
have very poor internet, hence me being. My question is about mitigating social media misinformation. So Ron's point about cost being an issue, there's two Facebook groups and cost constantly comes up about, I don't want to be incorporated, it's going to cost too much. I want to be incorporated, I want better services, which is why we're doing the study. But I think if the study is going to be about the boundary first and the cost after the fact, I'm concerned about it flying right from the beginning. But backing up to my point being social media misinformation. So is anybody going to look at the Okanagan Falls News and Events Facebook page? That's your raw, uncensored feeling about incorporation. There's another Facebook page called Okanagan Falls Community Forum, which was created because there was too much chatter on the news and events that gave. So there's two Facebook groups is what I'm saying in Okanagan Falls. I'm sure there's other Facebook groups in Skaha Estates, Vassal Lake, Upper Carmi. Is social media going to be monitored? Is any social media misinformation going to be mitigated? I guess my question is, whose responsibility would that be? And at what point will there be community engagement and somebody posting RDOS messages as far as fact sheets and those kind of things? Is that built into your plan as far as community engagement? Social media is a pretty big thing, and in this community in particular, Facebook is the medium of choice. So that's my question.
Okay, I think that's a really important question. I think we need to hear from both Ellen and Sherry, as well as probably Christy.
Okay, shall we go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, Sherry, jump in if to correct me or to comment further. Misinformation, that's a very difficult one. It's something we have encountered and are encountering right now at Columbia Shuswap. What we have, the reality of the situation is well, there's two realities to it. One is that we don't have the resources to be monitoring constantly the Facebook and responding to every charge that comes forward. We also don't want to get fall into the trap of legitimizing or giving oxygen to people who really just are kind of have a particular viewpoint and want to keep pushing it irrespective of the facts. What we try to do, and what we're certainly doing up north, and what we've done in previous studies, is to say that is to try to position the committee and the study as and through our website and through social media, try to position the study and the committee as the source of the factual, reliable information. People can go to whatever sources they wish, and we don't get into mudslinging contests with other sources. We don't kind of respond to other sources. We put the facts and we put the information on our source, and that's where people learn to go to find kind of the proper information. We will be doing after every meeting, we will do social media. Well, actually, before every meeting as well. Social media as well. We'll also be putting online on the website as kind of the central resource, the one-stop shop resource of for all information on the study. We'll be putting up all of the materials that we present to the committee, and we'll put them up in ways that are easy to follow, easy to access, and easy to ask questions about. We'll also have going on in kind of in real time, we will have frequently asked questions updated kind of page on the website, and we'll respond to that and answer questions every week on that. So we'll update that every week. So any questions that come from members of the community that are posed through that FAQ portal, we'll respond to and post the answers, and we'll share those with the committee at every committee meeting that we have. So that information will be out both on the website in response to the questions that come forward. It'll also be as part of the committee packages, the agenda packages. So we will really focus on putting out all of the factual information on the study and on all the different analyses that are done, and the various parts of the study that we'll be presenting, and we will and we'll do that on an ongoing basis. So we won't be waiting 5 months to be communicating with people. Those will be posted regularly with FAQs done every week. I think it is. I'm just looking at the other points that the community engagement, and I think maybe just one further point, just to go back to the idea too about the monthly committee meetings. One of the things that we have found very helpful on previous studies, and we would suggest for this study, and I think we talked about this last day, would be for the committee to consider having a portion set aside at every meeting to invite questions and to answer questions from and to the public, any members of the public who are in attendance, whether that be electronically on this platform or even better in person. And so that's an opportunity too for people to question the committee and the consultants, and for us to give answers.
Okay. So thanks for that, Alan. And but I think to some extent,
I may.
sorry.
I wanted to interject, if I may. So will the RDOS or the consultants be using Facebook as far as a medium in order to reach the local community through those various pages? So for instance, would the RDOS post go to the website for facts and information and then forward those links to those pages? Who would be doing that?
That is something yes, we would like to see happen, and that I'll work with Sherry, and I will work with Christy to make sure that happens.
Next question, which is, as a committee member and we see the chatter, is there any sort of set talking points or information that we should say or shouldn't say if we are to be the front runners in ensuring good community engagement? What can we say and not say? I guess we did this with Bob through the last one. We had talking points. I think it would be very good to have some sort of reference page or some sort of information that we can say and not say. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. We'd be happy to put some together, and folks can use them or use them as a basis on which to build. But we can certainly kind of outline some suggested points that people may wish to use in their communication.
Mylene, have you got what you needed? Because I've got further questions on this. So what I'm sort of sensing is the project consultants will use as their primary medium the project website and schedule communiques outwards. But I'm not hearing sort of engagement on Facebook and other social media sites. So I guess that's a question for, and I can appreciate that that would take a ton of time. And I'm also not, you know, I don't know if it would be effective. But anyway, I think this is a question for Christy. What's your perspective on this?
So, okay, so first of all, we keep talking about a website. Now, we have RDOS Regional Connections, which we've got about 68 people visiting on any given day now, because we've been pushing this for some time. If this is not the way that we're going to go, we should probably decide that soon and get those people trained to go elsewhere. What RDOS Regional Connections, I've sent the link out a couple of times. You should have a look because it's quite a powerful tool. It does have Q&A. It does have an option for people to sign up for updates as they are posted. It puts all the minutes, all the fact sheets, the insight papers, everything. So, you know, I mean, I think we set it up in the very beginning, just sort of anticipating that maybe the direction that we go. What we find, we always find Facebook is one of those challenging things for a local government. You're not going to jump in because number one, you don't have the resources, and number two, often it's just baiting people. You know, they're looking for that. So with committees, sometimes when a committee member may struggle with seeing that kind of thing. So Mylene, I don't know that we are able to access those Facebook pages. Lots of them are locked down. And so we don't have the benefit of seeing them, but you as committee members do. And so, you know, what we found in the past that's effective is a rebuttal that may be put up by a committee member who's part of that Facebook group is sharing the link to the RDOS Regional Connections or the website. And intelligent people will go to that. They will see this debate and they'll see all this stuff and they may disagree or agree, but lots of them will go to that link and they'll check it out, and that's where the facts are. So, you know, we found that to be quite effective in some of the more controversial situations. Committee could consider that.
Okay, so there's a suggestion there, Mylene. Do we want to try to run with that for a while and see how it works?
If you truly want the community to be engaged, that seems to be the place you go when the sirens start going off. I think if you really want to get the community involved, the Facebook groups in our area are the strong place where everybody listens and follows. So perhaps RDOS does the initial part with making a post, and those people that live in those areas that are on the committee can just share that post to those Facebook groups, and perhaps our chair have a list of those Facebook groups of all of the communities, just to make sure that there's something fresh being posted at least once a week, if not twice a week. I know it's a lot. Facebook, Instagram, you name all of the social media things, they are time consuming. People left full.
Okay, so lost you there, Mylene. But from what I know this must be frustrating for you, and you know, I know you're doing the best you can, but what I think I heard you say was that ideally we would monitor those primarily two Facebook sites and try to put some kind of a posting up there once or twice a week. Am I close there, Mylene?
I think there's more than one, as our consultants were saying, and as Christy was saying, there's a number of Facebook groups. There's going to be one for Upper Carmi. There's going to be one for Skaha Estates. There's going to be one for Vaso Lake. Pretty much every community has their own Facebook page. And I think ourselves as community members need to identify what social media works in their community and use that to the advantage of this study by posting and reposting whatever the latest news is through the Regional Connections website. It's fantastic. And if we don't get out in front of social media, this is the day and age that we work with. I think community engagement is key. If you want people to come out and vote either for or against, you need to have the community involved. And getting down to where the community is on social media. In this neck of the woods, it's Facebook. So I think each of our community members need to identify what those pages are, get in and make sure that we're posting at least once a week to those groups. And then I guess if we can invite RDOS in to be a part of those groups, that would be helpful.
Okay, Christy? Thanks, Marlene. Christy?
I'm not sure I want to see all the posts that are in those groups, to be honest. No, so just as an example, as Mylene suggests, so we have been contacted by several of the administrators of the Upper Carmi group concerned with, not necessarily having the right information. So they have signed up for our RDOS Regional Connections. They sign up directly there, and they've also given us an email address, and we just send the information out to them as we would with anybody else. So that is where, again, as Mylene suggested, just getting those Facebook administrators on side with using RDOS Regional Connections, the resource requirement otherwise is really significant. So, something the committee may want to consider.
Okay, so I think we've identified that social media is a significant player here. And it'll probably be something we'll struggle to deal with. Some suggestions have been made. Is that a reasonable start? Are there any other questions? Do we want to talk about this further? Okay. Other questions? Okay. So, Alan, did you have further to present, or?
No, Mr. Chair. I think that was kind of our focus for this evening. So
Okay.
we'll be going now on from tonight and moving into the analysis, and be coming back at our next meeting with some information on that stuff.
Okay. And are you and I both going to meet our deadlines for SCAHA Matters, September 20th?
We are indeed.
She gives us great opportunity, but it's tough to keep up.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's good to hear. What other questions? Folks, this is your chance to ask questions of timing. Bob.
Yeah, a question for Sherry and Alan. Would you then be able to develop just a brief page of talking points for us? This, in fact, this is an idea from the governance study, and Eleanor Walker was the one. I want to give credit where credit's due. She was the one that suggested the talking points, and it was helpful because the committee, we all spoke from the same page. But if you wouldn't mind, just maybe 10 points or something, and that would be really helpful for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. We will take care of that.
Thank you.
Could I ask also, just if we're talking provision of reference material, I didn't have the benefit of watching the presentation due to my ineptness or ether world, but can we get a chart or a schematic one that shows the whole process right through to incorporation with off-ramps? We've been asked for that. And two, can we get I say schematic, for this project itself, noting its key stages. And, I like pictures, but if you want to do it in a different way, that's fine. But I've been asked several times by people, I'd love it if you'd give me something that I could put up on the wall in my shop or at my corner or whatever. would save me, if nothing else, it would just save me having to talk about it with people as they walk by. I could just direct them to this thing and they could self-educate. Is that something we can look to you, or did you already address this?
No, we can do that, Mr. Chair. We did. We'll kind of we'll borrow some of the materials we presented earlier tonight that maybe you didn't get a chance to see, some various pictures and stuff, but we'll build it from there. We'll make it very simple, and we'll give the committee a draft and see if you're comfortable with it, and then we'll go from there.
Actually, that's a really excellent point. It's Phyllis here speaking. That's a really excellent point, Matt. And I was also thinking, even, you know, when you look at all the Area D fact sheets, even if there was an overview of that too, what communities get what for what services, you know, because if you read all the different when you read all the different documents, it would just be so much simpler if it was on a chart. That would really be helpful.
Okay.
Alan probably wants this call to end soon. His to-do list is getting longer. All right, any other questions?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep, we heard you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had to, my earphones ran out of gas there, and I'm just having trouble hearing folks here. Let me see if I can turn up my volume somehow.
We just heard you agree to put forward some sort of a grid that shows the different communities within the area and the services that they currently utilize. I think. Is that correct, Phyllis?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking, if that's a possibility.
I'll answer on behalf of Alan. Yeah, I can hear you even if he can't. So I've got the note, and yes, for sure we can provide that. We'll bring it back to the next meeting, both the overview of the services as well as the talking points and the process graphic that you that we referenced. So
2 process graphics, 1 for the project, 1 for the whole process.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome, Sherry. I see a question from Eleanor, and then I've got Ron.
Yes. I'm wondering if one of our talking points or questions could come at the whole thing by asking, in each little area, what would you really, really, in a perfect world, like to see happen or develop in your part of this area? Because maybe we'll find that there's a commonality that we can look at that gives us a positive approach as opposed to just asking what you already have. I don't know, maybe I'm not phrasing it well, maybe it's an out to lunch idea, but it occurs to me that the more we can approach something to give people the opportunity to look at what they want and then go from there to look at, okay, what, then you can say, okay, if you really want that, the boundary configuration that we have to have is going to be this, and this is what it's going to cost. I don't know. I'm not the expert here, but that's my question or statement or whatever.
Okay. So in part, what is it that people want? Okay. All right, Ron, you're next. Ron?
Yes, and thank you. It just took me a moment to find the unmute button. Thank you very much to Eleanor. I think that's a brilliant suggestion. The how-to, of course, I agree with you. That's a different question. But I think there would be a lot of interest in that kind of approach. Back to what Phyllis suggested, I just want to say I appreciate that very much. I know I'm curious to see what the difference is in these different areas. I think the members in these areas would want to know that. And I think it sounds exactly like the kind of process we're engaged in. You know, what are the services that you are receiving now? And some of these areas may be different. And I don't want to speak at length on it. But then beyond that, going forward. A question I have, and I don't know the answer to, and I hope the consultants can help or staff. If you go forward to a municipal district, a municipal status, what flexibility is there under that organization, under that model, to have different services in those different areas post incorporation? And indeed, how do those costs get impacted? Reasonably, people care about paying for a service they're not receiving. And so that, I think, is a big question. If you're in the municipal district and you're not enjoying the benefit of the service, if you're in the municipality, would you have to pay regardless? Under the regional district model, unless I'm misunderstanding, I think sometimes you don't pay for the service if you don't, there's a saying, if you play, you pay. Is that also the case in the municipality? That's my question.
I think, I don't think that's not a, I don't, forgive me, I don't think that's rhetorical. You're actually asking me to answer it now. I know you were suggesting people may wonder that as well, but yes, we can answer it now too. There are, in a municipality, there is the ability to have local area services, similar to the way we approach it in a regional district. And so individuals within a local service area will pay a particular tax that others don't. It's most common when we're dealing with what we might call kind of hard infrastructure. So if we're dealing with a water system or sewer system, only the people who are physically connected to that, or in some cases able to be connected to it, would pay for that. But we also see it in cases of street lighting, for example, like an area that has street lighting that the rest of the municipality doesn't have. That area within the municipality pays for it and the others don't, those kinds of things. It gets a little more difficult, and this is not dissimilar to regional districts as well, but it gets a little more difficult with services that have more kind of a public good aspect to them. So parks, for example, we can't deny access to parks. So in a municipality, if you have a park system, everybody tends to pay for that. In the same way as in Area D, if we have a park service, everybody pays for that kind of thing. So, within the boundary, at least, you have everybody paying for that. In this case, it would be within the municipal boundary.
That may not be accurate, Alan, but we can check on that. Upper Carmi, for example, I'm not sure if they pay, and I may be mistaken, but that's a real good example of an Upper Carmi issue. And that's something that needs to go into a lot more detail. If I can ask a supplemental question, and you just triggered one. I've been asked this. This is a real question from people, a fellow in Skaha States. Big, serious question. And I told him I don't know, but I'll ask and get back to him. And someone asked now, streetlights. And the question was, is it mandatory? Do you have to have streetlights if you're a municipality? I said, gosh, I don't know. I certainly can't imagine why you would have to. And his comment, which I think was a real good one, he said they like the dark sky and they don't want streetlights. He's a rather famous stargazer, has an interesting observatory himself. And that was a deal breaker for him. Streetlights, no chance. Now, I don't know if you know the answer, but it seems to me, I don't know if there's a law that says we have to have streetlights if we're a municipality, but that's in essence the question. Do we have to?
Right. You don't have to. No.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question asked, question answered. Good. Look, there's a couple of people here that have not had a chance to hit the mic button. So if you have a question, please be interested in hearing it. Vi, Jim, Jim. I think that's about it. David?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Vi. Yeah.
The streetlight situation is interesting because on our street, we have lights on our gate, and we went away and the power went off and the lights went off. And I was getting emails, can we turn your lights on so that we can have some light on our street? So just basically the opposite of Ron's friend in Skaha Estates. our neighborhood is sort of okay at our end of the street because our lights go off at 11 o'clock at night. But when the power goes off, our lights aren't on, and it's dark at 5 o'clock at night in the wintertime. People like to have a light. So
Yeah.
it's interesting what,
Okay.
what people would want. Would our neighborhood, would our street want them if they had to pay for them, or just if I pay for them?
Yeah, that's happened at Vassal Lake as well.
Yeah.
And the person who was paying the bill decided that they weren't going to pay it anymore. And so we have no lights on the street.
Yeah.
And we do have break-ins.
Okay. So there's pros and cons on streetlights.
Mm.
We'll get into that in more detail as the project goes. David, Jim, any comments or questions?
I thought there were some very good discussion points made tonight, and I'm looking forward to further debate on them, that's for sure. And streetlights just being one, but I think it's going to be a very good, wholesome discussion.
Thanks, Jim. David, did I see your hand up there for a question, or you were just waving at us?
Well, I was just going to talk about streetlights. Okanagan Falls Irrigation District runs some streetlights in Okanagan Falls. It's on the water bill. People pay for them. And I've been approached as operating the water system here to put streetlights in Skaha Estates. So it is something that some people are interested in.
I had no idea that OFID was paying for the streetlights.
Well, it was many, many years ago. They don't run the streetlights, but they pay for them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's a grant to the irrigation district from Fortis. It's kind of money in and it's money out, and then the money goes back to Fortis for the streetlights.
Yeah.
So OK Falls takes the calls when the light's out, they pass it on to Fortis, but the ratepayers don't have to pay for the streetlights.
Yeah. Okay. I'm cognizant of time. It's coming up at 7:30. Question one, do we have anybody not on the committee? Anybody from the public? I don't believe we do, but now's the point in the agenda when we would ask if anyone from the general public was here. I'm pretty sure there isn't anybody. Can I just verify that, Christy? Is there anyone from the public who's online?
I don't see anybody on there. Crystal, do you have anybody sort of sitting in the background that we might not be able to see?
No, I have 0 other attendees.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as much as anything, maybe that's a message that we need to get out on the social media, that if people are actually talking about this several times a week, well, damn, maybe they're interested in observing one of these meetings themselves, instead of just talking about it. So,
If I can jump in, sorry. I think that was going to be one of the things you were going to talk about tonight, is establishing that schedule so we could make sure that that was out there for everybody.
okay. I'm having a gray moment here, Christy, so go ahead, fill the gap.
So I think the discussion on regular scheduled meetings and what that schedule could look like. So for the short term, until we brought our consultant on, we established a twice a month, every second and fourth Wednesday to coincide, or first and third, to coincide with the agenda schedule. But I thought there was something on the agenda tonight that was going to address, really solidifying a regular scheduled meeting, so that the public can get used to the fact that every third Wednesday, this meeting is going to happen.
Right. So can we verify that? Is it going to be every third Wednesday of the month, or are we going to go every second week? What are we doing? No, you're muted, Alan.
Beg your pardon. I think if I can jump in just for a second, I think what we had talked about was, and Christy just helped me with the exact date, but I think we wanted to get it for the Wednesday just prior to the board meeting, did we not? And that would put us at was that going to be the second or the third Wednesday?
That was going to be the second. So our
Second.
board meetings are our board meetings are the first and fourth. So I think it was the second, or first and third. It was the second.
Second, yeah.
So I think, Mr. Chair, the idea was to see if the committee would agree to a monthly meeting every second Wednesday for a couple of hours, and that would give your consultants enough time to put together a proper package and to get it out in advance so everybody could have a look at the materials, and then allow for a couple of hours of good discussion and presentation.
Okay, so group, the suggestion here is that we go with a monthly meeting on the second Wednesday. So are you comfortable with that? Now that you've got the sort of timeline out in front of you? Okay. Christy, do you want a motion on this, or what sort of direction do you need? You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. I was on a different screen. Yeah, I think a motion is appropriate in this case. Then it's embedded in the minutes and it's transparent.
So can I have a motion that we meet monthly every second Wednesday? David, made by David, seconded by Bob, thirded by Eleanor. Okay, any further discussion on that before I call the question? Bob?
Yeah, question for Mylene. Will that work okay for the schedule for getting it into Skaha Matters? Because, you know, as long as we can stay current with Skaha Matters would be great. So speaking of the motion, if it works, I got a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm thinking that with her deadline of the 20th, 22nd, and us being done sometime in the second week, that should work. Okay, any other comments or questions on that issue of timing of our meetings? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, that's well, anybody opposed? Seeing, hearing none, that motion's carried. Okay, I'm flying blind here, Christy. What's next in our agenda?
I believe it's adjourn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If there's no further comments or questions, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay. Bob's making a motion to adjourn. Vi seconding. So we've got a motion and it's seconded, so we're adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Enjoy the
night.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Sherry.
Night, everyone.
No problem. Good night.